Hey, my friends, thank you for joining me for this episode of Real Live Talk. I'm so pumped that you're here to check out today's conversation with my guest, Bryce Taylor. Bryce is the lead pastor at Manheim Brethren in Christ Church in Manheim, Pennsylvania. He is an awesome man of God. He and his wife, Christina, have, I believe it's 8 children together. And yeah, I know we're going to have some questions related to that. You're definitely going to want to listen. There's going to be some serious wisdom dropping here for parents and for pastors and people in ministry and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be really, really good. He's a native of New Zealand. You're going to want to listen just for his accent. He has an amazing accent. And I love the New Zealand accent. It's awesome. So I'm excited for that. But anyway, I'm excited that you guys are here. I'm pumped for a really, really awesome conversation with Bryce Taylor, who we went to Bible college together a number of years ago, but we haven't had a whole lot of interaction since then. And so this conversation is also going to kind of serve me personally for reconnecting with Bryce and finding out more about his life and ministry and what God is doing. And so I'm excited to have the opportunity to share this with you. I pray that this conversation blesses you, challenges you, makes you think. If it does, if you are listening on one of the podcast platforms, if you would consider subscribing or leaving a review, that would be absolutely amazing. If you're watching this on Facebook or one of the other platforms, if you'll follow my Facebook page at DK Lamastra, that way you'll get notified of all future live events and live streams and all of that good stuff. If you are interested, if you don't like the content, obviously don't worry about doing any of that. But I pray that you do. I pray that the conversation blesses you or makes you think. And so again, thank you so much for being here, and join me in welcoming my guest for today, Pastor Bryce Taylor. Okay, sorry, I didn't know that was gonna cue the intro up. But anyway, yeah, you can still hear me?
Yep, all good.
Yes. All right. That's always good. Well, Bryce Taylor, thank you, man. It's so good to see you. First of all, I'm just privileged and just excited to reconnect with you today. It's been a number of years. We were at Bible college together back in the day, and probably have had extremely little interaction with you ever since then, other than just being connected on social media and stuff like that. But I'm excited to just hear about your life and what you're doing in ministry and what God's been doing in you and through you and all that good stuff. So thank you, man, for your time, and just thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to reconnect and learn from you, man.
Well, so you graduated, was it in '06 from Elam, or what year did you graduate? I think you
Yeah.
were a year ahead of me, if I remember right.
Yeah, our class graduated '06. We got married in '05 and end up moving back to New Zealand with my wife Christina for a year, and then came back to the States. You go through Bible college, you it's such a weird thing to be in college and meet the person you're like, hey, you know what? Like, I want to do life with you. I want to serve
Mhm.
the Lord with you and do ministry with you because I remember her walking into breakfast, and then you say goodnight and they go into their dorm, and at Elam Bible Institute, and so you see them all day long, and that's just such a bubble experience, right? It's not normal or usual, and
Sure.
so yeah, you connect, really make a close connection. So yeah.
Um, when did you guys start dating pretty like freshman year, or what year did you guys actually get together?
Yeah, so we actually we started hanging out actually after doing at Elam. We'd go to New York City for like that outreach time down there with
Nice.
NISM.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, we started talking, I guess, like in our time off while we are in New York City, and then we had an experience where our class. Um, we lost one of our classmates like in the middle of that, actually kind of close to the
Oh
beginning.
yeah,
So
yeah.
when Anthony, who was a friend of mine, who I had been like unpacking discipleship with him for uh, like for that summer, we were both working on the roof and different things together, projects around campus. So when we found out he had passed away, we were as a class sitting in chapel, and then then getting a call um, from different administration people, and then saying to myself, and I think Matt, who was the class president at the time, hey, you guys need to help lead your class through this.
Mm,
There's quite a large class. We were one of the larger classes. I think the class ahead of us was the largest that had come through, and we were the second largest. So it was a large class. I don't know if it was 60 or more or 70 or so, but we were really tight and we grew really close together in that. And then at the same time, I'm talking with this girl who, for me, was just challenging and leaning into growing in the Lord as well. So that grew our relationship pretty quickly. And then we came back.
mm,
We're on campus. We're diving into studying and classes really quickly and unpacking with one another. Like, well, we're back in classes. Anthony's not here. It was kind of another level
yeah.
of grief and all of that. So um, trauma didn't bring us together. We were talking, but it definitely like meant that we were connecting on stuff that was here pretty close. And at Bible college, you're doing
Yeah.
it anyway. So yeah, we grew close together for that semester, and then the next semester. She actually stepped away from school, and that was when I asked her to marry me, like the next
Ah,
semester. I'm like,
okay.
yo, I don't want anyone else to jump into
To
it.
scoop you up.
Yeah. So we started writing and did a relationship long distance. She was in North Carolina. So that was cool.
So you were actually engaged before you graduated
Yep. We were
then?
engaged.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was
All
fun.
right, man. Yeah, yeah, it's because my wife Denise and I, we started dating our freshman year, and that was one of the reasons why I asked you that question, is because I was just curious about what your experience at NISM was like. So NISM, for anyone who doesn't know, it's the New York School of Urban Ministry. And second year at Bible college at Elam, we would always our whole class would go and basically do an internship kind of a thing. It used to be like 7 weeks long. I believe they've shortened it since then,
That's
but
what,
back in our day, we were there for almost 2 months, and as much as Elam itself is a bubble, like you mentioned, NISM is even a greater bubble because it's just your class. And so you really do have that opportunity to grow together. One of the things that happens though is that the freshman class coming in doesn't really get the chance to connect with people, you who are 1 year ahead of us. We didn't really get as much of a chance to connect with you guys because I think we were on campus for a couple of days and then you guys are gone. And then we actually connect a little bit more, I think, with the upperclassmen. And
mhm.
so anyway, it's but that whole thing, and man, I didn't, because of that, I never got a chance to meet Anthony. But man, I remember that though, man. I remember getting that news and our hearts were just so broken for you guys,
Mhm.
just being there. And yeah, what you said is definitely something that's so real. How when you walk through something that's uh, a difficult situation like that, when you walk through trauma together, it really does do something to kind of pull you closer, and you pull from each other, I think, and lean on each other a little bit more. And I just imagine that being in that environment where, again, you're in that kind of tight bubble, you're together for all this extended period of time, and then having this extra, just unspeakable, tragedy to deal with on your hands, but walking through that. I just imagine that it was such a unique experience.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, and for some of those students that were in that room when we heard that news, like the first time that ever um, had anybody around them close pass away. You got people that in that
Mhm.
room, their grandparents haven't passed away. They haven't even had to say goodbye to a dog or a cat. They're
Right.
10 years old and just processing like life in general. So um, it really was a unique situation to have a group of people so differently. You had adults in the class coming out of Teen Challenge who had experienced a lot, and you have some that have lived in a Christian bubble who haven't experienced life, and then one of your classmates presumably dies by overdose, which, that's, in itself just a hard
Mm,
thing to wrap their head around. And so, yeah, there was a lot of unique pieces to that. As a leader, I would say, looking back, it was so stretching, um, to be one of the older in the class, and I think looked to for, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but people looking to me for either answers or comfort or just something along the way, and processing, sitting down with the four or five that were looked to for that, and um, the president of the school at the time, on the phone with me, just saying, "Hey, give me a read on what's going on." And as a leader or as a young man,
mm,
trying to like decipher and read, like, where are people at emotionally,
wow.
where are they at with grief, um, and and to try to relay that and enter into conversations about grief and, um, yeah,
Wow.
anguish. It was interesting and stretching, and
Wow.
yeah, yeah, learning.
Yeah, you came to, well, when you came to Elam, did you know that you were going to be a pastor? Was that something that was on your radar? What did that look like for you? Was your intention in going to Bible college, was it to become a pastor, or did you have different plans at the time when it started?
Yeah, I came to Bible college with the notion in my mind that I was going to grow up. My
Okay.
pastor, who was a missionary from the States, planted a church in my hometown in New Zealand, and I was in ministry, like helping him plant a church with doing some of the youth stuff and some worship stuff, and his daughter Susie was going to school at the same school, and her and I at the time, this is terrible, but we were dating at the time, and went to Elam, and then broke up. But this the whole process we were in, and just growing up, and that was, it wasn't like I went, "Hey, I want to grow up." It was I went and thinking, there's all this stuff that my pastor's saying, "Hey, you have a calling on your life, and Elam's a place where God can refine and get you ready for what's next."
Mm,
And I said, "Yes, God, I want all that you have for me, and I don't want anything to hold me back." And that was a dangerous prayer, but
yeah.
conversation with God. I didn't realize, again, I'm just young and like excited to follow Jesus, and experiencing, I think, like I would say weekly, I was experiencing during that season, like, God challenging me and changing me and giving me new hope, like weekly, and revealing more of Himself to me often. And so it was a very exciting experience. Um, there was a lot when I went into Elam. I came in hurting and broken, and so
Mm,
unpacking a lot of my stuff that had happened in my life. And so Elam was a refiner for me, a place where I went, and like, yeah, I was in the fire. You could say, just being refined, and
yeah.
it was being chipped off. And so I was a different person when I came in than when I left. So, yeah.
Mm. Man, that's awesome. Then when you graduated, you said you went back to New Zealand
Hmm.
for just a year, and then
Yeah.
what was that like, man? Like, what was, so you went back to New Zealand, then you ended up back in the States, and when you came back, were you stepping into a pastoral role at that point, or I'm just trying to connect the dots here and get the pieces
Yes.
together for how you got into pastoral ministry and everything.
Yeah, good, cool. Well, I went back to New Zealand really because, like, being married, like, and getting married, I really didn't want, like, I knew that who I was, and like the person, like, in the States that my wife had met, right? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
was I was being changed and renewed by God. So it's not like, you know, it's not a lie, but you're meeting somebody in change.
Sure.
And I have a
Yeah.
whole like story, and a life in New Zealand. So I wanted her to know the culture. I wanted her to learn about who I was. I wanted my family to like interact with her, and all of that, and for her to see the culture and understand the culture. And I knew like I was called to go. So I didn't expect that I would stay in New Zealand my whole life. I didn't know if that meant I was going to be in
Mm-hmm.
Africa or South Africa or China or the States. I had no idea. And so we're just like, okay. at least for a year, I'm going to take off because I've been in ministry coming out of like high school. I stepped into youth ministry and worship ministry, and 17, 18, 19, 20. I was touring the country with Youth for Christ when I was 17, 18,
Mm, okay.
youth pastoring, planting a church. And then 21, I was heading into Elam. And so there wasn't really a time when I wasn't in ministry that I could remember. And so coming back, I was like, I'm just going to chill. No
Yeah.
ministry, like no ministry, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
so I came back and we got a house right there in my hometown on the beach, or like one street back from the beach. I got a job as a plumber, drain layer, um, and just did that for a year, just working. And every weekend, our mission was to go out and see the country and have a great time. And then I worked during the week, and she would, she was at home. She didn't really know anybody. So it was a crazy experience for her, a very lonely one.
Yeah.
She would walk out to the beach and she would have, experience the culture through my family. And yeah, it was just a great experience. And then when we came back, we found out we were pregnant. We came back to the U.S. And went to stay with her family in North Carolina, be close with them. I was building log cabins, and then connected with a church in Warrenton, Virginia, which was a little town like, um, yeah, in Northern Virginia, where a lot of people commute with government jobs, a lot of them.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, went and joined the staff at this church with doing the youth and the worship, and kind of got my feet wet in full time ministry in the States. And so I was there for 3.5 years serving on the staff there. And that's, yeah, kind of
Yeah.
how it got going.
I love the wisdom of what you guys did after getting married and living in New Zealand for a year and being able to kind of connect her with your culture and with your family. Denise and I did the same thing, but it was opposite because she was from Mexico, or
Mm.
she is from Mexico, but you know what I mean. She she had grown up in Mexico, and all of our relationship was in the United States. And she had spent a lot of time with my family, coming, with me, spending some breaks with me, and just having a lot more interaction with my family. And our relationship was completely within the culture of the United States, and all of that. And so we after we got married in New York, and then 2 days later we were on a plane, and we were in Mexico for our first 3 years. And we were in ministry in Mexico, but that was the mindset at the time. It was, I want to be connected with your culture, I want to spend time with your family, who I haven't had a chance to do that with yet. And then it actually got to the point where we had a recommendation from brother Paul Johansson to come back after a little while, to come back to the States. And to there was a lot involved there, but we had been wrestling with those ideas anyway, and God had already been speaking to me about coming back to the US and getting involved in church planting and some other things. And he kind of, not knowing what the Lord had been showing me, he kind of he pulled me aside one day and really gave me permission to go after what I felt like the Lord had been leading us into. And so all that was really cool. But yeah, I love the wisdom of that, man. I love the wisdom of even just like, I'm gonna be a plumber for a year, or I'm gonna take a we're gonna just kind of slow things down and just kind of, yeah, get to know each other, and get to know each other in a different context than the bubble that we were used to. I think that that's really, really cool.
Yeah, it was. I wouldn't trade it for anything, and I would recommend it to anybody, especially in ministry. Yeah, especially.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
huge.
What's one thing that you miss about New Zealand?
Oh, one thing. Do I have to mention one thing? Well, recently we
You
just
can
went on
mention more than one if you want.
vacation. We were just on vacation. It's funny. You go to, we're living now in Pennsylvania, and so um, going to the beach is like a thing. It's an event where it
Right.
used to not be an event for me.
Right.
Go to the beach for lunch, or I would go to the beach to chill out after work. Now I go to the beach and it's like a big ordeal. So yeah, we went to the beach with the family, and going out to the beach in even in North Carolina, like an area. that's quieter, considered quieter. There's no boardwalk and lights, which just drives me insane that people would put all of that near the beach because you ruin it. But to the beach,
Yeah.
like go out there and just see just crowds of people, and
Hmm.
you're setting up your tent and wondering if you've made enough space or are you encroaching on their space. You're like, I've never had to even think about that going to the beach before, but it's a whole new experience. So one thing I miss about New Zealand is just being able to go out to the beach and just be the only soul, like walking down the beach and just having that space to. It was a time and a space where I would connect with the Lord. It was a time and space where I would clear my head, and so that I miss that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. We would take trips because where we live, we're about an hour and 15 minutes or so from beaches. There's some beaches that are closer, but they're really, the nicer beaches. We're about an hour and a half, hour and 30 minutes. And my wife and I, we used to just get in the car sometimes and drive and just go to the beach. But we'd go kind of like in the evening time, and we would often go like at the time of the year where there's not a lot of people out there and stuff like that. And it really is an awesome place, just kind of, when it's calm and there's not a bunch of people around and all that kind of stuff, and you can just kind of go and stand up by the water, listen to the water, and it just was something that we would do kind of regularly, to just go out and disconnect and just hear God, just hear God speak and just commune with the Lord there. And there's something about getting outside of the regular function of life and the routine and the mundane and all of that. And of course, God speaks to you in the midst of that stuff too. But there's something about just kind of getting outside of all that, whether it's the beach or a park or just in nature or, whatever. But there's just something about that that I think is really just special, to kind of disconnect every once in a while, just to be with God and be intentional, about that.
Right. It's something I often ask that when I'm meeting with either a young pastor or a leader that's overwhelmed, burnout, and
Yeah.
uh, I'll say, like, what is your thing? Like, where do you go? What's your, like, what do you really switch over and can clear your head, connect with God? And most leaders can normally tell me, oh, this space, and then the tough question is like, when did you do that last? And
Mm,
next, because
yeah, man.
that's annoying question, right? And it's hard. I get it. But I guess the what if I have for all leaders and pastors, like, what if there was a necessity for that? Like, what if you were called to necessitize that? Like, you're not allowed to serve, you're not allowed to lead until you know, like, when you're doing that next, and the leaders around you even being able to hold them to that. I think it's a good process to think through. But
Wow. And another thing about you guys, you have about what, like 77 kids now? Is that the number?
closing in on no, there's none in the oven, as they say right now. We are up to 8 boys, so yeah, we have a busy
Say that
schedule.
number. Say that number again. You just kind of glossed over that number like it's not a big thing.
It's really not. I mean, if you don't have a TV, and God blessed you with that ability, like
If you don't have a TV.
we
I was literally assuming that you guys just didn't have TV for a number of years. Yeah.
have yeah, no, it's 8 boys. It's like having, like, if you've been to a vacation Bible school or you've been to a theme park, it's like that all the time. We have to, be pretty on top of things and scheduled, and there's lots of kids running around. Um, but yeah, it's a lot of fun too, man. We have
Yeah.
a blast. I mean, vacation in itself, even as nervous as we were, like, it's just full on. So
Oh yeah, man. I can. Man, I'm wondering what kind of checks and balances are in place to make sure you don't like leave a kid at the beach by accident. Like, what kind? It's just, man.
yeah,
But it's all
you
it's it's
healthy
it's an amazing thing.
around you, delegating, like the couple that sits next to you on the beach. They don't know what they're signing up for when they sit next to you on the beach. Hey, you got that one? You can see that one, right? I'm going to turn my back right now. The other one's running the other way, and it's kind of what happens. But
Yeah.
yeah, But our
Yeah.
kids
But
really,
so far you haven't lost any.
no, no, we haven't lost any, you know,
That's good.
more than an hour or so.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have one any just quick story of
Dude, don't ask that because my wife will watch this and then she'll be like, "You actually said that?" No, but there was
uh
the one that we both remember is we were going into a grocery store, and very seldom do we venture out with all of them to a store. But we went into the grocery store and we got all the way across the parking lot, and she looked at
mm,
me, she looked around, and she's like, "Oh, Benjamin's still in the van, like in his seat, strapped in." And we just both looked at each other like we could laugh or cry, or it's just the nature of that
oh
moment,
my goodness.
very
Yeah.
defeating, and you felt less of a human, and you're like, will we ever live this down, you know?
Mm,
um, so but yeah, you're constantly counting in your head. Yeah, sometimes people will catch me on a Sunday morning, with like, what I'm looking around at my kids, and I've literally got my hands up and I'm doing this, and I'm like, oh, we have an extra one, or where's that one?
mm.
Yeah.
So like I don't know, man. I'm just thinking 5 or 6 kids in and they're all boys and number seven's on the way. Are you thinking like this one's got to be a girl, right? Like just statistically, you got to like how it, so I mean, did you guys you must have just had to learn to have an incredible sense of humor when it came to how God just gave you all boys. Like that's an incredible thing to me.
Well,
That's a statistical anomaly for sure.
it really is, and we've heard that. Even doctors will tell us that. Nurses have told us that. Um, each time we go in, we hear it over and over and over. We're just like, yeah, yeah, and they just kind of look at me like, okay, you know how this works, right? I'm like, yeah, I'm good.
That's to me that's evidence of a creator right there. That's
Yeah,
evidence of divine influence in our lives because that wouldn't just happen in nature by itself. Um, but yeah, man, your wife is just got to be such a rock star to
uh,
be
she's
so
amazing.
outnumbered and raising all these boys and
Yeah,
you
she's
know
incredible. She's incredible. Like, legitimately, she's a creative. Um, yeah, I I would say, there's free people, and then there's super free people, like free spirits, and she's on that
mhm,
super free side. She's like,
super free.
yeah,
That's
she's just
awesome.
like, yeah. So
Yeah, love that.
that's great. And the killer is, I think this for any parents. I'm going to go deep real quick, but like the killer for parents, families, and like especially like young families, and maybe there's some young moms listening that will get this, but like, is comparison is the killer, right? So like like we're great, we're doing good, but if you start to compare like where you want to be, what you might have been doing,
Yes.
or any of that kind of stuff, that's where you get pulled down, and it gets weight.
Mm,
But otherwise, like we're free, we're doing what we feel called to do, and that's what we have to come back to. If we get locked up or down or whatever, we have to be like, okay, this is us, and like our lawn being cut perfectly, our kitchen looking like it's from a magazine, our floor,
right.
like all the things that are standards put on you by, whatever from whatever direction, family, community, culture, whatever. Um, you just have to, yeah, you have to push that stuff aside for it to survive, I think, and to thrive.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah. Sometimes I leave the kitchen at nighttime. I'm extremely exhausted. I've been working like crazy, like at home, and the dishes need to be done. I can think of 100 things that need to be done, should be done, and the best thing I can do, the most spiritual thing, is going to bed and
Come
spending
on.
minutes to talk to Christina, my wife, and just unpack the day with her and hear her out. And yeah, so I think reading, like a thing that I'm still learning, but learned many years ago, is that like her love language being quality time and not acts of service.
Mm,
I can
yes.
would like go and do the dishes and feel like I'm serving her because she'll come out to a clean kitchen tomorrow, and she's laying in bed going, "I wish you would just spend time with me." I'm like, okay,
That's real, man. Yeah.
yeah. I can even go to bed thinking I'm the man. She's asleep, and I'm like, I'm the man. I just cleaned
Yeah.
up, and really I didn't help at all. Even though I did something that other people,
Mm,
oh, that was so nice of you. But like serving one another is serving one another.
yes. That's
So
so good. That's so good. Um, how would you say that? Okay, so obviously, you're a pastor, and being a pastor is not always a regular full-time job. Maybe every once in a while you have a week that's a little bit normal or a little bit more laid back. But I mean, you're dealing with things, right? You're dealing with people, and you're
yeah.
pouring into the lives of people, and there's more involved with it than just a regular 40-hour work week, in most cases. And
Mhm.
so you have that, and then you have your wife, and you have 8 kids, and then everything that you have going on in life. How have you and Christina kind of handled the balance of everything? I know a lot of people talk about balance, and like how balance is key and everything. Other people talk about balance like balance is a joke, like you're not gonna have balance in your life. Where do you guys kind of fall just in that, and how have you navigated just everything, being a pastor, continuing to pour into your ministry and what God has called you to do there, but recognizing at the same time, like what you just mentioned was really beautiful, and it's an area where I think that we get off track and we lose things sometimes. It's, as men, I think particularly, a lot of times we can deceive ourselves into thinking that because we're doing good things, that we're making the people around us happy. And that's not always the case, because maybe they aren't seeing it from the same perspective as we are. And
Right.
so, but being intentional about being there for your wife and being there for your kids while fulfilling the assignment that God has given you in terms of ministry. How have you guys kind of learn to navigate that process with the busyness and the different things that you have to handle? And yeah, just curious about how that's worked for you all in the unique situation that you're in.
Yeah, good. It's a good question, and I would say I think you said it right. Like balance is, um, well, I mean, different people are going to hear this different ways, but I would say looking
Hmm.
for balance is the wrong target. Um,
Mm,
I would say like when balance is the target, I think you're always like going to be doing this. Like like, oh, we're running this way. Oh, we're running this way. Like, oh,
hmm.
I think I think you got to know like, okay, what's our mission? What's our purpose? What are our values? And I think, and then coming around that, because then you end up probably just like the scales end up going one way and resting where they need to,
Mm,
just staying focused on what like God's called you guys, like if you're talking about marriage and a family, like focused on what you need to focus on. If you're balancing, to me, that really speaks to like just trying to like walk on eggshells in some areas and work on like like pleasing this person and pleasing that group. And I think like for me as a pastor, I need like, so I work for, like in a technical way, any pastor hopefully in a healthy system is working for a board who represents your congregation. And like I submit to them, like, what are you looking for? What are you asking me to do? And they give
hmm.
me a job description, like, and at the same time, like I feel called to this community. And so if those things align, like this is great, because I can run in my lane, serve the Lord, serve like the community and serve my biblical community the way that God's created me to be,
Mm,
who God's created me to
yeah.
be. And part of that is me being like a father, right? A husband, and lead my family well. Like that's a part of that. In the same way, like the guy who's an electrician, right? If the community needs this electrician, they'll hire the electrician to be in this community. If they don't need an electrician, he'll dry up and there's no work for him. He'll go to another community to serve. But if there's a needed electrician, he'll serve in this community. And what will the electrician do? He'll say, okay, I need this much money to live, and this is how I'll frame my work, my business. I'm good at this kind of electrician work.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll get
Yeah.
paid to do that. And if he's good at it, like he'll stay there and do it. And he's not fighting for balance. Like he's working like in his lane, and he's supporting his family by doing it. If he's doing it in a healthy way, he recognizes like that there's got to be a limit and a cutoff. Like once you reach a certain point of like what your family needs, like financially and resource that way, then the rest of who you are, like bring that resource back, like time and stuff and energy, and bring it to your family. I could do the same thing in ministry. So
Mm.
like I serve, and I serve in the lane that I need to serve, and it takes a certain amount of time to do it, and the rest of my resource and time, like I'm serving my family. That sounds like it's like the leftovers, but it's not. It's I get
Mm-hmm.
up, I do a job, I serve the community, and my family needs me. I'm there for them, and so I just like to look at it that way. Like I'm all in, and I'm not trying to like find a balance. I think when when the question comes up for me, like it does, like, oh babe, like when are we getting quality? Because she's a quality time person. Like I'm
Right.
feeling like,
Right.
and say like maybe we need some more time. That's to me not a question of balance. It's a communication thing. Like, okay, what have we got clarity on what our focus is in this season, and what's happening? Am I communicating well? Am I hearing her?
Mm.
And so, um, because what's going to come out of that if we communicate well with those we're in community with, there's going to be clarity, and we're going to work together on stuff. So as we're
Mm.
talking, just like I'll unpack like what do you mean by you need more time? What does that mean? What does it look like? And she might say, well, I just need you, like she might just say that, hey, you've been like cleaning up the house and doing different things at night. I just want to stop at a certain point. And I might say, for clarity's sake, what time does that what time does that mean? Like, is it 9 o'clock? Is it 8:30? Do we need to bring the kids like to bed earlier? And we'll just work it out together, right? Because I'm here, you're here for the same reason. Like we want to be together, we want to be unified, we're a family, we're a unit. I
Mm.
think like, yeah, that's to me, that's not working on balance.
Yeah.
Working on like, hey,
Yeah.
vision, this is our mission, this is our purpose. We want to be a family connected. So like, what does it take? Let's do it. Um,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's as you said, kind of pursuing more so like better communication and making sure that we're accomplishing what we're supposed to be accomplishing in the season that we're in, as opposed to this like pie in the sky idea of balance and everything being neat and orderly and this is in place and that's in place. And it's like that's not real life for the most part, like that's really not real life. I love one of my favorite scriptures, and I always forget to pay attention to the reference, but it's in Proverbs, and it says, where there are no oxen, the trough is clean, but
Hmm.
much growth comes with the strength of an ox. And
Yep.
it's like, look, if you don't like, if you want everything to be neat and orderly and tidy and no mess and no chaos and all of that, then you need to recognize that you're probably not going to have much growth.
Yeah.
but but if you're willing to kind of get into, and I'm not saying that our lives should be so chaotic that we are not experiencing, I believe that even in the midst of the busyness and the different things that we have to do, we can still have a mindset that allows us to experience the rest of God. I think that he wants us to live our lives from a place of rest. So I'm not talking about being scatterbrained and all over the place, but I do think that, as you said, like in a certain season, you might be like the scale might be a little bit more this way or more this way, depending on what's needed in that season. But I think that the goal, or like the key, really, that is such a big key, is that communication part. And even going back to what you said earlier, a really big key is the not comparing yourself part, because you can compare yourself to say, oh well, look what this family's doing, or look what this ministry is doing, or look what this father is doing, or mother, or whatever. And when we compare ourselves, it's really ultimately not helpful, because we're different, we're in a different stage of life, different mode of life, we have different goals, we have a different mission, all of that. And I do think what you're saying is so key. It's like, look, if I might be a little bit out of balance right now, but if I can really focus and engage on what I'm doing at the time, because that's something that I know for me that I struggle with. It's having my focus in the right place at the right time. So even if I'm in a particularly busy season where I've got to work longer hours or something like that to get through a project or to get through an event or whatever it might be, it's kind of like, this is crunch time. We got to buckle down and get this done.
Mhm.
Um, I can allow that to carry over into the time that I have when I am supposed to be with my family or with my kids or with the Lord or just disconnecting or whatever. And I can bring all of those thoughts and all of those challenges and everything with me, so that now that I'm with my family or doing something else, I'm really not with them. Like, I'm really not focused. I'm really not present because I'm too focused on something else. And so I
Mhm.
think that that communication piece and that ability to kind of leave things where they are to an extent. Sometimes it's not 100% possible, but leaving things where they are so that we can really focus and engage with what the moment that we're in calls for. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think, when something I find, I was just thinking of a family, like right now in our community, and like trying to apply, like if somebody says, "Hey, you got to find balance," trying to apply that to their lives. Like, I think they'd say, "Yeah, we probably need to," but they're both in this couple, both in law enforcement. Um, One would be, daytime hours. The other would be rotating through night shift, day shift, and some days they won't see each other.
Mm,
And is you look at that and you go, man, how is that even possible? They have a family, they have kids, they have. I won't get into details about like anything else, but because I don't have permission to talk about them here. But I think like of that scenario and what they're walking through, if their goal was balance, they would be beating themselves up and each other
mm,
to reach that standard of like they're supposed to be balanced. Let's frame balance. But I think they're willing to make certain sacrifices now, and they're looking out for each other and serving one another to the best of their ability in this season because they're making sacrifices for like working towards something together. And I know that
mm,
they're working on like they have now, like they're working on a like having a house, like a rental property, and like
mm.
off hours, like he's over there and painting. And it's like I could be home, like, and we could be just
Right.
hanging out as a family and like throwing the ball with my kid or whatever. But I'm here, and it's like his wife and the family, like they've decided for this season what they're supposed to do is this. It's going to bring another different kind of freedom, right? After the season,
Yes.
they're able to rent that out and do things. And so they're like for a season pushing themselves to the limit. But as a family, I know that they know what their goals are. I know they're anchored in the Lord. I know that they desire to serve one another and serve their kids well. And so yeah, they're like I love that like their focus isn't balanced. Their focus is like we're a family called to do this and be this, and for this season it means this. There, you called out that verse, and I often reference it from the book "Community is Messy." I think is a book, but it talks
Okay.
about
Hmm.
like uh, if there's no mess, there's no harvest, right? If there's
Hmm.
mess in the store,
Yes.
there's no harvest. And so I often think of that. Like I think of that in terms of family. Like if like there's a lot of work to be done, and there's mess, and the fruit of that is there's a harvest. And so if
Mm.
it's calm and it's all
That's
balanced,
good.
like I don't know there's any farmer who said, you know what, I need balance, so I'm not going to milk the cows tonight. Like, I'm not going to go clean the stall this week. Like, no, they're working
Hmm.
their tail off because they decided to be farmers. Like, they're working from sun up to sundown. They come and they feel very relieved. They feel very like fulfilled. They're like, this is what we want to do. We love doing it. And the wife who wanted to be a farmer's wife or a farmer herself, seeing the ability to like put that meat in front of at the end of the day, I know my
Yeah.
wife likes to like cook a
Hmm.
meal and like, enjoy your meal because I want you to enjoy your meal. Like that moment right there, like for both of them is fulfilling. It's 8 o'clock at night. You work your tail off. Like, and you're not making $1 million a year. Like, why is that fulfilling? It's because it is like this is what I'm called to do, and I love doing it.
Yeah.
So the goal of balance again, I think is like a myth, but I think the focus on like what are you called to do, and like communicating that and deciding together as a family and praying about it and seeking God to go together on it is a greater, more pointed mission, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, man, that's really good.
Psalm 51, I want to share this because I think this has been an
Yeah.
anchor for me as I talk to like couples getting started. Um, and the message, it goes like this: going through the motions doesn't please you. A flawless performance is nothing to you. I learned God worship when my pride was shattered. A heart shattered lives ready for love don't for a moment escape God's notice.
Mm.
Like I'm not pursuing myself like this flawless performance here on earth,
Hmm.
going through the motions, right? Like of
Yeah.
what like this Christian like expected, but a broken, heart shattered life ready for love that doesn't escape your notice. That's what I want to be. And I think what that creates, like as a man, like if we're just talking like to men today, I would say like what that creates for you is a posture and a heart attitude that I think like God can mold, God can use, and I think becomes something that your family can interact with easier too in conversation.
Mm.
Like that that
Yeah.
hot life ready for love is a listener, is a learner, is a broken person saying like, yeah, there's like I've been given much grace. I want to give much grace. There's just stuff that comes around the broken that I think we should be desiring that. And yeah, anyway, I think of David when I read this, just that he personified that for us, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I could go on,
Yeah.
I could preach on that, but
No,
anyway.
it's good, man. It's a good word. Well, I should mention that you are, before we run out of time here, that you are the lead pastor at Manheim Brethren in Christ Church in Manheim, Pennsylvania, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
how long have you been there?
I started March 12th, 2020. So
Oh, wow.
2 years ago.
Like 2 days before the lockdown, basically.
Yeah, and my first day was me writing to the congregation to say that we would not be having church this Sunday because of the pandemic.
That's
So
so crazy.
it was absolutely nuts. No one knew who I
That's
was. I hadn't
bonkers,
been
dude.
introduced to the church yet, other than by a photo on a screen, and it was crazy. So if anybody from MBIC watches this, know that my great thanks to you for not giving up,
Whew,
and
for
with us
real, man.
that season. I'm blessed, man. It's just a great community and a great congregation, and they love the Lord and love the Word. So we've been
Yeah.
blessed.
Well, I don't know a lot about it, but the Brethren in Christ denomination is kind of headquartered there in PA, right?
Yep.
And from what I understand, tell me if this is accurate or not, because like I said, I don't know a whole lot, but it seems to me like that there's an emphasis, there's a focus on obedience and holiness in this particular denomination. Now, I mean that should be an emphasis and a focus for every Christian,
Mhm.
but I do feel like that there's something that's kind of like I don't know, like almost like a we want to be focused on the roots of what Christ taught, and we want our lives to be an expression of loving the Lord through obedience and through ascribing to holiness. Would you say that that's an accurate assessment?
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's something that was attractive to me, like when I looked at it, the BIC,
Hmm.
looking at the look essentially like let's look at the red letters, right? Like if that's the climax of what we were
Yeah.
hoped for and what was given. So Jesus' teaching and his words are held up like this, and like the Bible written to this climax of where Jesus
Hmm.
is, and then these additional like hey, here's how you can do that with Paul, but like Jesus' teachings, man, like wow. And let's like model our life after him and be obedient. Yeah, that's them. And so there's this, how do we walk like that? How can we look
Yeah.
like him in our community?
Yeah.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
cool.
And so, um, what would you share as far as like how do we emphasize the that holiness and obedience without becoming overly dogmatic or focused on works to the extent of works righteousness kind of a thing, or does the question make sense? So having that emphasis on obedience and holiness, which I think that we've probably both seen where people can become so focused on something that's supposed to be good, whether we're talking about this or something else, but then they can take it outside of its proper context to where it becomes all about this thing, and it can just become a religious assent kind of that kind of a thing. And I obviously holiness and obedience, which is something that Jesus modeled to us perfectly to the point of his death on the cross. Philippians 2, he was obedient even to the point of death. And he came to demonstrate to us, he came to demonstrate the Father, and he came to demonstrate to us how we could live empowered by the Holy Spirit and relate to our heavenly Father, and how we can walk out in obedience. And he came to demonstrate not just the greatness and the authority and the power of God, which of course he did, but he also came to show us what it looks like as a person living dependent on the Holy Spirit, lives life and can walk in power and faithfulness and holiness and obedience and all of that. And so, yeah, just what would you say on that, as far as how we can focus on having this established in our lives, where I want my life to be about being obedient to the Lord, and I want my life to characterize the holiness of God, but just without kind of falling into that camp of becoming religious minded, or overly dogmatic or focused on works.
Yeah, I like your question, or I like what's behind your question, because I think that's where like a lot of the wrestle is for
Hmm.
me. Being in a community too, like where there's a lot of Anabaptist roots, not just BIC, but you have the Mennonites, you have the Amish community, um,
Yeah, that's
you
right. Yeah.
have the um, you have the yeah, Church of the Brethren. You've got a lot of that come out of the like out of that roots, and really it's the what we've been called the River Brethren, where they were baptizing people in the river and really calling people to a life of holiness, right? So be set
Hmm.
apart, and so in its like in that motivation to be holy, it is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And then there's those extremes that it can go down to be uh, like in the world and not of the world, the Romans 12 thing, um, that can be taken like the Amish way, meaning like I'm going to completely separate and like create some rules so that I don't step over and oh now I'm of the world as well.
Hmm.
And so like I would say that's where some people might say it's an extreme, other people might not. But I think it's a great call. It's a great thing for us to be couched in our faith, to walk in obedience. That I think is a walk of love of Jesus. And
Mm,
I think where I think it is the best way that I can describe like its most beautiful places in community with others. I
mm,
think where it gets like skewed is when it gets isolated. So I think of monasteries, right? These places that are set up for people to go and become holy, and what do they have to do? They have to minus relationships with other people, essentially,
mm.
to be
Okay.
holy.
Yeah.
Why? Because you're not going to be faced with 90% of the things that make us unholy, like interacting
Mm.
with other humans. So, like, what
Yeah.
do I do as a pastor? Like, I'm doing people work. Like,
Right.
we're struggling with, like, man, like I'm called to holiness, but like marriage is hard. I'm called to holiness, but like going to work is hard. I'm called to holiness, but like I'm in a high school that's like just I'm surrounded by and entrenched in things that are not of God, and all those things. Like I'm in a business, I'm leading a business, but the government says I have to do this or that, or I've got to like follow these kind of rules, and and I've got to give way to XYZ. And so how do I stay in the world but not become of the world? And so everybody's kind of wrestling with like, how do I remain like a light and salt and light in this world? And so I like the focus that the BIC has in this realm of holiness. I like the pursuit. And I think what I've been wrestling with is like, how do I create or help people create like a mode of where it doesn't get unhealthy for them, like a conversation, I guess, or a communication within the community that helps. So I actually came up with this list that's kind of helpful for me, and that is the 5 C's, which helped me launch a young adult ministry and helped me like kind of bring this out,
Mm.
the
Mm-hmm.
thing to wrestle with. So like in a healthy community, there's really like these 5 things that I'm seeing: strong connections, there's care, there's a common challenge for us all to be connected on a challenge. There's clarity of how I'm involved in that or what I'm supposed to be doing, and then there's a celebration when we get there
Mm.
or along the way. And
Yeah.
so I use that in like as I'm encouraging business leaders, any community or business or thing that I'm alongside of. I'm using those 5 things to kind of help them navigate those conversations and stay in the lane of, hey, we're pursuing holiness, we're pursuing God in this season to be what He called us to be. So how do we do that? Let's create healthy connections. Let's care for one another. Let's have a common challenge. We know what it is. Let's create clarity whenever we can and ask the questions so we know what our role is. And let's celebrate with one another. And I think every healthy community that you can name to me right now, if they're healthy, I can point out how they're doing those 5 things. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
how's
Man,
that?
that is a beautiful thing. And that just sent off so many light bulbs in my head and questions to ask you. But I know we are up against the clock. So, Bryce, I do really just appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining me and for being on the podcast. I would love to do it again because, like, literally, I've got like way more questions that I want to ask you. But I appreciate you sharing your heart with me and with the listeners today, man. And thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you for having me. And yeah, I'd love another conversation whenever you're ready.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, let's set it up.
All right.
Well, thanks everybody for taking the time to check out this episode. Hope it blessed you, challenged you, inspired you, made you think in some way. If it did, if you'd consider subscribing, sharing, leaving a review, I'd really, really appreciate that. You guys are awesome. Have an awesome day. See you next time.